Hi, everybody. Yay! Thanks for being here with me. Come on in, make yourselves at home. You know the routine. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's officially spooky season. Let's do this. It's quite spooky this year. We're gonna get into it. You know we are. uh, Thank you for joining me. We will get into the official class in just a few minutes. Gonna give everybody a chance to get into the stream. If this is your first time here, I highly recommend grabbing yourself a beverage, a snack, something that you enjoy to imbibe. Maybe a journal. You might grab a copy of your natal chart. You might grab a tarot deck or another divinatory system that you like to work with, runes, shells, what have you. Hi, Bree Sky. Hi. Yay. Thanks for being here. Hi, Sarah Marie. Hi. And the weirdos, aka my patrons, begin to file in. Make sure you get your free popcorn in the lobby. Hi, Patty. Yay. Happy blessings. Happy blessings, you all. So happy to be here with you all. As I was saying, we will get started officially in just a few moments. Give folks a few minutes to come in. Bill, nice to see you. Hi. Hi. And as I was saying, grab a journal, tarot deck, natal chart, other divinatory systems that you might want to have just around. Namaste, Nancy. Nice to see you. Hi. Yay. I'm glad you're here. Very cool. Thank you. Thank you. It's not just an aesthetic, it's a lifestyle. My goodness. Grab yourself a snack, something to write on, perhaps, etc., etc. Folks who are subscribed to my Patreon at the Venus level and higher, that's $9 and up and higher, will get access to the workbook that I'll be referring to throughout class, the slides that I'm going to show you tonight, and lots of other stuff. You get access to some free classes that we've recorded over the years that kind of dial in on some of the granular elements of the Sabbats. And folks that subscribe at the Sun level and higher, that's $23 a month and higher, can get sessions with me to work through the wheel in their own life. We can look at your natal chart, we can pull some cards, let's talk about it. You can also find me through my website. There's tons of free content on my website. Sign up for my newsletter. It's very irregular. I'm actually really bad at sending it out. Thanks to everybody who's ever signed up and gotten like 2 newsletters from me. Patreon actually does have a free option now where you can follow me on Patreon, and I do make some of the content on Patreon free and public as well. So, but maybe I put more on my website. I don't know. I have a lot of stuff out there. Come explore it. I also do a weekly podcast where we get into the granular elements of all of these classes too. So, all of that good stuff. Yay! Got your notebook. Blythe says hi. Hi, Blythe. Awesome. Very cool. Cool. All right. Well, it's 6:05, so I say let's begin. Welcome to Samhain. This is Witch's New Year. This is the third harvest. This is the blood harvest. Wheel of the Year 2023. A little bit of a preamble. I am an eclectic modern pagan. My studies began before the internet and then have proceeded since the internet. And my background is a big old mishmash of stuff. Like a lot of pagans here in the Western world, I absolutely take it as my responsibility to sort out fact from fiction and all of that good stuff, so I don't use that as an excuse, just as a little reminder to myself. Like, oh yeah, I gotta go check my references. Let me check my P's and my Q's. But I am a big fan of witnessing the capacity of our ancient ancestors and seeing them as not only humans, not only folks having a spiritual experience, but as great scientists, great researchers, great explorers. And, you know, it was their curiosity that brought us to how much we know now. And I love that mix of science and religion, or science and magic. I think it's paramount to, well, my worldview. Um, and I really also am very excited to show pagans where our stuff is interwoven with other festivals and celebrations and holidays with various folks around the planet, past and present. It's always really cool to see who else is doing what at the same time as us, as well as, you know, maybe there's some common roots there. Maybe there's some common influences there, most likely, right? I mean, we've all been living on the same planet this entire time. So, um, and because I'm old, you know, Methuselah, it's my style. I sometimes use antiquated language, and I apologize in advance for that. I'm working on it. I am, you know, moving to evolve my vocabulary as we evolve as a species progressively. So, when I say things like goddess and I'm saying she, her, what I'm really meaning is that stuff that's in all of us that the goddess has. And any gender can access these things: to nurture, to be brave, to gestate, to hold, to protect. These are all elements that we can find within the goddess to provide. And when I say God, and sometimes I will say he, him, what I really mean is that energy that's in all of us, that has the capacity to thrust, to go out, to be strong, to be brave, to protect, to provide, and also to explore and to do all those stuff. So, yeah, sometimes our gods and goddesses are depicted as humans with genitalia, and sometimes that matters to their myths, and sometimes it totally doesn't. And I think that, you know, when we talk about deities, we have to remember that a lot of them are shapeshifters, a lot of them have multiple forms. It's our language that limits them, it's our capacity and our imagination that limits them. So, let's not tell the gods and goddesses what they were exactly. Okay. Um, and before we begin, let me also say I'm teaching this class in Seattle, Washington, which is unceded ancestral Duwamish territory. If you are here in the Puget Sound area, I highly recommend checking out Real Rent Duwamish. This is a nonprofit group that put together a trust, basically, where you can pay into it one time, or you can pay rent monthly to live here in Washington, and all of that money goes directly to the Duwamish tribe for them to do whatever they want to do. And currently they're voting on spending money on a new youth center, which is pretty damn cool in my opinion. There is a petition currently to fight the federal government to get federal recognition for the Duwamish tribe, one of the richest cities in the country, and we can't seem to acknowledge the Native Americans who were here before us. So check out the petition. It's on change.org. And last but not least, before we begin class, we are going to be talking about death a lot in this class. It is Samhain. And we are experiencing in real time a genocide. Certainly not the first one, not even the first one in this decade, not the first one in this century. Imperialism moves in many, many forms in our world today. And while I am not going to center politics in this class today, if you are working with me, if you're following me on social media, you know that I am a very politically aware person. And to me, these things are not separable. They're intertangled. We cannot, in my worldview, we cannot be spiritual people without being aware of the impact of our beliefs and our conduct on the world at large. And as modern pagans, as I said at the beginning of class, or at the beginning of this intro, it is absolutely our responsibility to be aware of the roots of our belief systems. You know, tonight we're going to talk about fixed stars. Those all have Arabic names because of the incredible Arabic mathematicians that named those stars, and those names are the ones that stuck. Are you a magician that works the lunar mansions? That is an Arabic magical system. Are you making that connection for yourself? Are you a magician or a witch or a pagan that's influenced by Kabbalistic magic? That magical system ultimately comes from Jewish folks and perhaps has deep connections with ancient Egyptians as well. Are you aware of that? And so, as pagans in the world today, I'm going to be the finger wagging witch that's in your face saying these things are not separate from each other, they are intermeshed. And it's our responsibility to be aware of those things and to conduct ourselves responsibly and with respect to the folks around the rest of the world that are doing this stuff too. So, with that said, I am sending peace and power and protection to all of the people in Gaza and in Palestine, from the river to the sea. Please let Palestine be free. Stop the forces of imperialism. To the people in Israel who are at the whim of their government, I am sending you peace and power and protection. I know that there are Jewish people around the planet who are horrified at what is happening right now, as well as people of all faiths and no faith. You don't have to believe in God to be a good person. And so it is vitally important to me to acknowledge what's happening in the world right now as we step into the dark heart of the wheel, where we die and we rot and we break down to be reborn, in a manner of speaking, at Yule. And so, with that, let's begin class. If this is your first time here, please put a pumpkin in the chat. If you have been here before, put a witch in the chat. I'm not going to center politics in this conversation. It is going to come up over and over again, though. But in the face of the horror that we are witnessing on Earth right now, there is an extra special element about Samhain that is incredibly important, which is that life is for the living. And in the midst of this holiday that is witnessing the breakdown of the natural order and the breakdown of the natural world, we have to sort of insist on our vitality. We have to insist on our liveliness and our life. And I will be reminding you of that over and over again in class tonight. Okay, so what are we doing at Samhain? I guess I could have put this up and been yammering at you this whole time. Sorry. Yay, we got pumpkins and witches here. Woo woo. Excellent. Thank you. What are we doing here at Samhain? We are working with our Sabbat sign, modern pagan element here, a pretty cool magical symbol for us to work with for this Sabbat. But here at Samhain, this is our major witches' work. We are stepping into the realm of death and transition, the Underworld Journey, ancestors and shadow work, purification and protection, the celebration of life, and rebirth through death. And thanks, guys. Yes, absolutely. Keep throwing them up in chat. That's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Here at Samhain, we are hanging out with deities that oversee or embody the ideas of death, transition, and the underworld journey. And, the themes that we're working with, the sun is dying, and daylight is shrinking, right? From the scientific aspect, our sun here for us in the northern hemisphere is moving further and further south on the eastern and western horizons. As the sun rises every day, it's further and further south on the eastern horizon. When it sets every day, it's further and further south on the western horizon. After Samhain, approximately October 31st, we have basically 6 weeks until Yule. And every single day will get darker and darker. This is by far the darkest part of the year. And then after winter solstice, again, for those of us here in the Northern Hemisphere, after winter solstice, the days will begin to increase again. And we'll talk about this more at Yule when this is a big deal. But this shift is a huge part of what we are experiencing emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually, as well as physically, biologically, here on planet Earth. The days are growing shorter, the light is growing dimmer. And it's important to note the phenomenon of the sun moving further and further south, because it's not just moving further and further south on the horizons, it's literally rising lower and lower and lower every day. And so the light is literally less. Those civilizations in the past and present that worship the sun as a deity are seeing this deity actually weaken. It's rising less and less high every day. And so, beings are watching this. Just from a biological standpoint, our serotonin production is stopping. This is our I give a shit muscle or our I give a shit drug that our body produces that gets us up in the morning and helps us give a shit to go get stuff done. And we're producing less and less and less of that as the sun is lower and lower in the sky. The light is dimmer. It actually shines at a different tone of color. Not only are there less hours of it, but it's also at a different angle than what we are used to. And so there is a massive physiological shift. And of course, how does the natural world respond? Well, it's getting colder, and the vegetation that has been so wildly abundant for the last few months, that's just been bursting out of everywhere for the last few months, has not only stopped, but those plants have started to die and decay. And so not only are we seeing the sun grow quiet and get lower and give us less heat and less light, but the earth herself or itself has stopped providing for us or is in the process of shutting those things down. And so psychologically and biologically, as well as emotionally and spiritually, humans and plenty of other living beings on the planet would be looking around at this time of year and thinking, what the fuck is going on? What's happening? Where did all the light go? Where did all the heat go? And we see that, in response to that, civilizations past and present have death ceremonies, death rituals, death celebrations, death as a deity, death-oriented holidays are possibly the most universal spiritual experience that we have any kind of record of. In fact, there is a fantastic new documentary called Cave of Bones that I just saw recently that once again blew my mind. Up until recently, we thought that the oldest graves, or we should say, the oldest graves that had been found were sort of shared between either the west site in the west coast of Africa or a site in Palestine slash the Fertile Crescent, and now, and those were around 100 to 120,000 years old, and that's a big deal. This isn't just the bodies of the dead. These were graves. They were bodies that had been prepared in a particular way and buried on purpose. We don't know what those people were thinking. We don't know why they did those things, but we know that they did it and did it on purpose. And it implies a lot about the social structure and continuity of the people. Well, a new site has been found also in Africa and South Africa, Western South Africa, I believe, in a place called the Rising Star Cave System, I believe is the name of it. And this is a grave that has been found in the... I'm not going to spoil it for you. It's an amazing documentary. But the age blows this out of the water. And probably not humans, but a different hominid that was living on Earth at the time. And so, death ceremonies have been so important to beings on Earth that it could be that humans learned them from another species on the planet. And we're so impressed by it, it was like, we got to do that. That seems important. So humans have been working with death, dealing with death, struggling with it, trying to understand it, and trying to appease it for a long time. A very, very, very long time. And with good reason, right? I mean, anything else can happen to the body, just about, and you live through it. But death is death, and death is irreversible and it's irrevocable. And so the psychological impact has been apparently massive. These deities take the form of several different concepts. There are angelic beings, like this one depicted. This is the death god or death angel, Azrael. But the winged being, all in black, with a sickle, very, very traditional for a lot of Europe, the Mediterranean, Middle East, even northern African areas, to depict death in this manner. But we see also psychopomps and tricksters come through as well, ancestors, messengers as well. And these are all entities that are assisting in the crossover, the leaving behind of this realm of existence and the entering into or the accepting of whatever the next realm of existence is. And one of the depictions are this type of thing, an actual embodiment of death, an actual personification of some type of death. Again, something that you will find in nearly every religion, past and present, around the planet. Nearly. Not all, but just about all. But another group that we see quite a bit of during this time of year is the wild hunt. This is also referred to as where are my notes? Here we go. Wotan's army, the Sidhe, which are also the Fae or fairies, the family of Harlequin, the Furious Host, and many other names. And these processions were thought to be made up of a variety of different characters. In some cultural descriptions, this group are very surreal and absurd. They are otherworldly beings, and you might have goblins and trolls and, vaguely odd, but, not too sinister or menacing. But then in other processions, you have the Morrigan, or you have Hecate, or you have Hel, goddesses that oversee the lands of the dead. You have the Fae, who are basically like elementals. They're very different from the way that we depict fairies here in America. It's an entirely different energy situation, much more serious. You might see the bodies of the dead. You might see soldiers who were not buried after war, or stillborn babies in this procession, and hunting hounds. And if you were caught out on the moors, if you were caught out on the back roads by this procession, you were taken under the hollow hills. You were taken into the underworld, taken onto or into the underworld journey. So what is the underworld journey? Well, the underworld journey is us heading into the murky part. It's us heading into the dark. And so, as we've just already discussed, it's heading into the dark part of the year visually. Less sun, weather's cold, plants have stopped growing, food may be scarce, shelter may be precarious, right? There's a lot of stuff going on there that is heading into the dark. And so, by that stretch, also, we're heading into a scary part. We're heading into a part where our lives may actually be jeopardized in some way, because hard to get food, shelter is precarious, I'd better wear the right clothes, because if I get wet, or if I, get a limb too cold, I may lose it, right? But on a psychological level, an emotional or spiritual level, the underworld journey is the murky and dark parts of ourself that we may really choose to avoid. They're the murky and dark parts of the world that we choose to avoid, that we misunderstand. And moving through this stuff can be very tough. It can be very exhausting. We do a lot of sleeping during the underworld journey. There's a lot of dream work happening because it's tough. It's tough to carry this stuff. It's tough to go down into these places and pull it up and wrestle with it. But it's necessary. And biologically, we're actually being assisted at this time of year to do this kind of work. The world is saying, hey, shut down for a minute and figure this out. This is important, and it's coming up from underneath us, in us, at the bottom of us. And we need to know what this is and what are we going to do about it. And this stuff can be really grisly. It can be, that we feel overwhelmed by things that are happening in the world. And that makes us want to shut down. Oftentimes, though, I find that the things that really plague us or are the toughest to bear at Samhain are things that come from inside. I say this every year, and, I say it at different times in the classes, but it's like whenever it decides to come up. If there are devils to be met on the underworld journey, they surely will come from your own heart. The things that we are ashamed of, the things that we feel guilt around, the things that we feel frustration around, but especially things like shame and guilt, that sort of like disempowering stuff. That's what that is. And they're heavy. They are the things that we carry, right? Was there something that I needed to say to somebody and I can't bring myself to say it, but I know I should? I'm going to carry that. And it's going to get heavier and heavier every day. It's going to get spookier and spookier every day. Are there things that I need to do in the world and I'm not doing them? I have to engage that stuff or I'm going to know that I didn't. We think back to mythos around the death process, like the incredible imagery that we get from the Book of the Dead from ancient Egyptians. And they talk about the heart of the dead being weighed against the feather of truth. It's a pretty massive scene. I highly recommend reading about it because it's really cool. But it's also incredibly illustrative of how in tune these people were 5,000 years ago, who knows how long ago, because that feather of truth was the person's own conscience. Like, what you were capable of doing in this life. Did you do it? You knew what you shouldn't do in this life. Did you do it? And we had that understanding then. I think we still have that understanding deep buried in us now. And this is the time of the year to do that loving autopsy on ourselves. Okay. So, as humans are working through this stuff, they are dealing with it in a wide variety of ways. And so we have lots of really trippy cultural elements that have come about through this practice. Obviously, any and all of our death ceremonies, connect to all of this type of stuff. But one of the things that we do at this time of year is we go make appeasements and honorings to our blessed and honored dead, our sacred dead. And that can look like a lot of different things. That can look like us, leaving offerings at places. Maybe we go and visit a family tomb or a stranger's tomb or gravesite, and we clean it up. We leave some flowers. Maybe we leave some candy on an altar or on a gravestone or any of those types of things. That's one of the major ways, is there's this open acknowledgement of death and its place in our society, in whatever society it is that you live in. And this is something that a lot of Eastern traditions have kept within their culture. They've always had it, and it's just as powerful and popular now as it ever has been. In the West, we really struggle with acknowledging death or dealing with it. And, if this stuff is scary and weird to you, that's cool. That's okay. But here's a place where you maybe could challenge yourself a little bit and say, maybe I need to go sit in a graveyard and think about my mortality for a little while. That's tough for me. Let me do that work in this time period where Earth is holding me and helping me do this work. And so offerings to the dead, ablutions to the dead, and honoring the dead in cleaning up their graves and things like that. Also, an incredibly appropriate time of year to build or refresh or maintain any ancestor altars that you have in your house. Side note, your ancestor altars should only have folks who have passed on. Do not put living ancestors on your ancestor altar. Unless you got beef. Just an aside. I know there's some baby witches out here, and we're all learning. It's okay. It's okay. We're all learning. But you're gonna get cut out of the will otherwise. But other stuff that we do, one of the big things that we do with our ancestors is prophecy. Again, heading into the dark. And one of the names for this holiday is the third harvest, because the other harvests are done. Lunasa or Lunasad, Lammas, is our first harvest. That's the grain harvest, and there's tons of abundance, right? And we know that there's even more to come. Mabon, or fall equinox, as it's called by most pagans around the world, is the second harvest. And this is the fruit and veg harvest. This is when our pumpkins and our squash and our roots and tubers and viney plants are all coming into their hotspot in the year and their massive moment of production. And then we have the third harvest, and the third harvest is here at Samhain. The last bits are being pulled in from the fields, whatever is safe. Nuts, maybe, are still being harvested at this time of year. But there's a shutting down of that process, too. And the other thing that's being harvested at this time of year is meat. Side note to the vegans here, we're going to get a little messy for just a few minutes. After the grain harvest has been pulled in, there is a very important accounting that has to take place for that family or that village or whoever it is that's shares in that grain harvest, because we have to know that there's enough grain for the humans, but we also have to have enough grain for the animals. And that grain is basically going to have to last all through the rest of fall, all through winter, and a lot of spring, potentially even all the way to the beginning of summer next year, before that food source is readily available for those animals again in the future. And if it has not been a good grain harvest, that means that there is not enough grain to keep everybody fed that entire time. And so one of the reasons, or the main reason why this holiday also has the name Blood Harvest, is because this is a time when a lot of animals are sacrificed, and their meat is cured, it's salted or whatever. And of course, if you're living in a smart community, they're going to use every bit of that animal. It's going to be shoes, it's going to be clothing, it's going to be tools. But I realize that for the vegans out there, it's pretty gruesome. I apologize. But this is the truth of humans on Earth for a long time. That these are practices. I'm not saying they're good or bad. I'm not saying they have to be this way. I'm just saying that this is what is. And so there is quite a bit of blood that can be shed at this holiday too, depending on how good or bad those last two harvests were. And so prophecy is my point here. Divination. And going to the ancestors and asking them, can you lend us your wisdom from the past? Can you tell us how you managed it when you had to go through this? What was it that you people did that made it so that you survived and were capable of giving birth to us and raising us and bringing us here? this is the time period for that. Now, I realize plenty of the people that are listening to this are watching on a laptop or a phone or whatever. They're in the middle of a city. There's electric light 24 hours a day. Our grain harvest is at Trader Joe's across the street. I get it. But psychologically, we've only been doing that for a little while. Biologically, we've only been doing that for a little while. And the metaphor stands. What bits are coming to an end? What thing has run its course? And we need to consider what that might mean for us in this time as we move through the next few months. What thing needs to shut down? What things are supposed to shut down? And what things are going to shut down whether we want them to or not. And again, this is a place where we might ask our ancestors for some assistance on how do we make our way through the dark? How do we make our way through this uncertainty? As a side note, when I say ancestors, I mean whoever stands as ancestors for you. So perhaps those are genetic relatives to you, but those might be cultural ancestors. You know, when we're talking about our queer family, our trans family, our non-binary family, a lot of us have been removed from our genetic families, and we build our families. We build our families. And so ancestor can mean anybody that has passed over that you would ask for advice and for assistance. Any of those people. And so that's the kind of work that we're doing this time of year. And there's a lot of different forms of divination. There's a lot of different elements that we might practice or try out. One of the means of talking with ancestors is the dumb supper. This is a tradition that's gaining more and more popularity. I think dumb suppers are really, really cool. I've done one almost every year for the past few years now, for almost 5 years. I can't remember now. My good friend Rachel hosts us just about every year. I think maybe every year. And you can set the table with whatever. Traditionally, it would be all black everything. The glasses, the dishes, the silverware, everything black. Tablecloth black, 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 black. And the idea is that you set out this fantastic feast and you leave seats open for whoever would like to join. We are not demanding, we are inviting the dead. We're speaking to them respectfully. If we're hoping particular people show up, we might want to put their favorite stuff out. If, you know, Grandpa liked to smoke menthols, we're putting a pack of menthols on the table. If Grandma liked her Miller Lite, we're putting a Miller Lite on the table. You know, whatever it is, right? Maybe somebody had a sweet tooth. We're going to have an extra bowl of candy by their seat. And they are invited to join us. And then whoever the humans are that are attending the dinner, sit down and eat in silence. And the idea is the dumb supper or the silent supper, to be silent the entire time. And this gives the blessed dead an opportunity to speak or communicate with us, make a noise, if they want to, if they are inclined to. And people have had all kinds of experiences with this practice. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes there's a very interesting feeling that people get that falls over the room. Sometimes you hear knocks and bangs, and it's more like true and classical poltergeist activity. Some people see things, or they have revelations, or they feel like they're having a conversation with someone, and they're receiving information. So, you know, it really can, your experience here can take a lot of different shapes, but it is a very cool practice. Anybody can do this. I don't really think that the all black thing is necessary if that's out of your means. I think the dead will be happy, I hope anyways, that the dead would be happy to just be invited over for some mac and cheese if that's what you've got, you know. They're your ancestors, right? They know what's up. They know if the electric bill hasn't been paid yet. They know what's going on. But it's a very interesting experience. It's, if nothing else, an opportunity for you to simply consider your own mortality, and to think about, you know, who might hold a supper in the future and invite you. Sometimes I think we're all at that table already. um, but that's just one of the things, one of the ways. Oh, we'll get to that in a second. Some other things that I want to talk about in terms of divination. We might have what else? Bobbing for apples, which I thought was actually my next slide. Let me see if I can find it. Where did I put it? Oh, Timmy, don't look at that. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. We're going to come back. Don't look. Don't. There we go. Bobbing for apples. This is an old Halloween tradition. And why? Why bobbing for apples? Well, apples for Celtic peoples were a sacred plant. Apples often have been thought of as food for the dead. Other witches bury apples at Samhain for the same reason. In Celtic myth, a bough that had all three phases of the apple's growth cycle, buds, flowers, and ripened fruit, was called the silver bough, and it was thought to be a type of magical charm that would let the bearer pass into the lands of the deities and the underworld. I found that passage in this cute little book, The Kitchen Witch, and this was a form of divination. How long it took you to get the apple? Was there something stuck in the apple? What size or shape was the apple? Did it have certain colors? Was there a pattern in the skin? All of that kind of stuff. And, now we think of it as just a game, but then it was a divinatory tool. Roasting hazelnuts and other nuts in a fire and watching what the nut did while it was roasting was another form of divination. And again, nuts being a big deal at Samhain. Another tradition was pouring molten lead or melted wax into water and seeing the shapes that it made, as well as, of course, checking your astrology and, reading tarot and shells and all of the other divinatory tools, bones and runes, etc., etc. One of the big practices at this time of year is bonfires. Big surprise, right? That witches are setting stuff on fire. No one is surprised. So here is yet another holiday where there is a bonfire. And like other bonfires, the woods that were used would have been sacred, would have been chosen as special. And how the fire was treated was very particular. One of the Celtic, I think this is a Welsh practice. I apologize, I'm not certain. But Col Coth, each family would have set their own bonfire at their house. It was banned briefly during the 16th century, but you can't keep a good pagan down. And the bonfires were danced around, they were jumped over. People would blacken their faces with ash as a blessing and a protection, and cold embers, once the fire had completely died out, cold embers were brought into the house and put in in the corners of the house, or under the bed for protection, and along with that, blood from those animals that may have been sacrificed in the past also put in the corners of the house as a protection and a blessing. During Cold Coath, during this jumping around the bonfire, people would say, "A cutty black sow on every stile, spinning and carding every All Hallows Eve." Every stile, the stile being grain storage, and spinning and carding, specifically carding is combing wool and spinning would be spinning that wool. So that's the connection to that stuff. Feasting in general was a really big deal during this time period for a lot of our pagan ancestors. And food in general was a really big deal. Back to the dumb supper. Just want to make sure that I got these notes in here for you. The food set aside for the dead shouldn't be touched by any other person or eaten, is what I mean specifically. Shouldn't be eaten by any other person. Should be taken out and left at the crossroads nearest you when that supper is done as an offering. Um, and as an extension of the dumb supper, one of the other supper festivals or supper practices that we see in ancient times was people who would go guising or masking or masquerading. And they would, it was very similar to like carolers. They would show up in a big mob at somebody's house and they would, yell and holler and do the thing. And they specifically went to the houses of the rich. Uh, Sometimes even the rich paid for people to come to their houses, and these people would act as the mouths of the dead. And these lavish feasts were laid out for them, and people would eat on behalf of the dead ancestors of that family. To refuse people if they showed up to your door was bad luck. It was not good. It was as if you were rejecting your own ancestors and saying, no, go find sustenance somewhere else. I'm not going to share my bounty with you. And from a practical side, a lot of the people that would be doing this guising or masking or mumming, again, in a tradition very similar to caroling and then all of the other processional type of events that we see throughout winter and into the very beginning of spring, Saturnalia, Mardi Gras, etc. These would be people who are out of work. The fields have been pulled in. The animals have been pulled in. There's not much work to do other than batten down the hatches and hold down the fort, for as long as you can during this time period until the weather is nice again and it's safe to wander about in the overworld, in the upper world. And so there also was a civic responsibility to acknowledging the people that had just helped your family pull in all of this food off of the fields. And, civic responsibility. It's a thing that people did in other cultures and in the past. We're not such a fan of it here in this time period. But it was a thing. It was a thing. It's how libraries and parks got built. I'm not going to go into it. But anyways. And so these types of dinners make a real moment for us to communally celebrate in silence and in loud festival happenings. Okay, so another one of our traditions at this time of year is ye old jack-o'-lantern. What the hell is the deal? Where did jack-o'-lanterns come from? What are they? Well, the pumpkin carved as jack-o'-lantern is an American invention, although it has become the standard more or less around the planet. This is one of those traditions that we got from Europe. We changed it and then gave it back to Europe in a different form. Because it used to be turnips and rutabagas and other root vegetables, parsnips, if you can imagine. I was like, how big were the parsnips and the turnips back in the day? They must have been huge. They were. They were really big. And so, we were talking about the wild hunt, right? The furious host, Wotan's army out there scouring the back roads for interlopers and unaware travelers. People would have carried this lantern when they were traveling about at night as a means of protecting themselves and scaring off predators, scaring off entities from other worlds that might want to kidnap them and take them back with them. And yes, we actually have examples of turnips. This is from Wikipedia. This is a turnip head. This is what they more would have like. That is frightening as hell. That is, I would be like, you know what? Let's let this human go, and we'll try to find another one. That's frightening. And there would have been a flame, an oil lamp, a candle of some sort put inside to light it up from within, just like we do today. But this harkens back to a much older ritual that is, 2,000-ish years old or so, that the Romans reported when they first began to encounter who they called the Celtics, or the Celts, who would take the heads of people that they killed in war and in battle and empty out their skulls and put a candle inside and put them up on poles around their property as warnings, but also as protection. They really felt like the seat of the soul was in the head. And this was sort of like taking the energy of that person and putting them to work to face back out and protect. So this is a tradition that actually harkens back to something much, much older and very oriented to death and working with the energy of death. Pretty intense stuff. Of course, trick-or-treating, right? This is one of the great traditions that we have left over. And I'll tell you what, there is no consensus on what is trick-or-treating and where did it come from. There are so many different stories. There's so many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to what the hell is trick-or-treating and where did it come from. What I notice about trick-or-treating is that it is very similar to the other processions that we see at this time of year, where people are mobbing up, they're dressing in wild outfits, and they're going and doing stuff. The outfits and the stuff may vary from group to group, from era to era, but the getting dressed up in a wild outfit and hanging out with a group of people and doing things, very, very consistent. And a lot of folks suggest that trick-or-treating comes partly from the processions that were acknowledging the wild hunt, that were acknowledging the shift in energy and these entities that were coming in that were sort of representatives of the breaking down of the natural order. And so it's suggested that masking is a part of disguising ourselves to look like those strange entities, those goblins, those demons, those devils, those spooky beings. And so they think we're one of them and they leave us alone and they let us go about our business. But also the tradition of wearing goofy outfits and pranking is a really big deal at this time of year. And again, the idea here being that we are assisting in the breakdown of the natural order, the breakdown of reason, of logic, of normalcy, and we're welcoming in chaos. We're welcoming in goofiness. Something I also say at this time of year is make room for chaos, or chaos will make its room. And what I mean by that is we cannot hold off this breakdown. We cannot hold off this undoing. It is natural. Now, it may be unsettling, and that's also completely normal and natural, but we can't stop it, right? Just as much as we cannot stop the sun from dying, it's going to do its lower and lower in the sky thing for the next 6 to 8 weeks. There's nothing we can do about it. It's something to be borne. It's something to be endured, understood, maybe, worked with, maybe, lived through. And so a part of the tradition of pranking at this time of year is very much about just acknowledging the breakdown of the natural order. It's also a way of sort of breaking us in to this breakdown of like, hey, let's get used to this. Let's get each other used to this. It's going to be goofy for a while. It's going to be wacky, kids. And by wacky, I mean, oh shit, this is really frightening. What do we do? Oh crap, oh crap. And so, you know, this is a classic shot of a house that's been TP'd. Nobody can afford this much toilet paper anymore, kids. This is a thing of the past. But in the ancient days, we used to TP houses. And I mean, who owns a house anymore even? That's wacky. That's the real breakdown. But the behavior itself was also thought of as an appeasement to these forces that were otherwise scary and misunderstood. And so, you know, during this time period, you have that type of stuff going on. And another thing in our pranking segment, in our pranking section, is the elders oftentimes will sit around the fire roasting nuts, doing their divination with their nuts, and gossiping loudly for the benefit of the dead. And there might be some pranks in that bit. There might be some jokes told. There might be some pulling of the legs of the dead, as well as pulling of the legs of the living, of like, I'm telling grandpa about what you did, even though grandpa's been dead for 5 years. A lot of that kind of stuff. So death, transition, underworld journey, ancestors and shadow work, purification and protection, celebration of life, and rebirth through death. This is our work during this time of the year. And yes, we just spent an entire hour talking about that on one slide. Hi, I'm Megan Angus. Welcome to my class. So how do other people around the world do this stuff? Let's take a look at that. Oh, let me say this too. Other names for this holiday, because Samhain is just one of many, which is New Year, as far as the Celts were considering or considered it. The year has two hinges, Beltane or Beltane and Samhain. And this was the gateway into life and light, and the gateway into death and darkness. And so for some groups, Samhain is the witch's New Year. There's a lot of other New Years that happen at this time of year. We have the Diwali festival from our Hindu friends and ancestors. We have Rosh Hashanah from our Jewish friends and ancestors. So we have New Year's celebrations happening past and present at this time. It certainly makes sense. But also the Celts thought of this as the gateway into this half of the year. Third harvest, blood harvest, we've talked about that. Devil's Night and Spirit Night harken back to that idea of pranking and the breakdown of the natural order of things. And the Day of the Banshee / the Feast of Saradwin and Beli, the Day of the Banshee, this is speaking to the shift in the form of the goddess that we are working with. So this is especially true for modern pagans, because a lot of us work with the idea of a triple-faced goddess. The goddess is finalizing her or their transition from mother into crone during this time of year. And this is the Banshee. She is that word that we said earlier that means fae or elementals, or as we would say here in America, the fairies. So this is the day of sort of the queen of those entities. The crone is the part of the goddess that oversees death, transition, the breaking down of the natural order, and the stillness that Earth embodies during Yule season in particular, and Imbolc to a lesser extent, and Samhain as well. And so these are other names for this time of year and this holiday. Global themes. If we are talking about what is the rest of the planet doing, endings, beginnings, transformations, fate, rites of passage, sex, death, and chaos. Pretty much all the stuff that we just talked about, right? Well, everybody around the planet is doing the same stuff. From our Mexican friends and ancestors, we have Dia de los Muertos. From our Yoruba friends and ancestors, we have the Huero Festival. Ireland, the Day of Banshee. Our Nordic friends and ancestors, the Rites of Hell. Our Welsh ancestors and friends, Nos Caelan Gaith. Our Sumerian friends and ancestors, the Descent of Inanna. Babylonian New Year's as well. And so throughout October, we have festivals that welcome in the dark and welcome in the unknown. We have the Aztec Day of the Dead on November 2nd. We have our Hindu friends and ancestors celebrating the Kali Puja at this time of year, which Kali is the great creator and destroyer goddess who has her giant gorgon tusks and is very intense, because she is creation and destruction, so she's riding on that vibe. The Feasts of Hecate happen at this time of year. From our Hopi friends and ancestors, we have Wubu Chim, which is a transitionary period of recognizing the god of death and Earth Mother Spider Woman. And then right at the very end of Samhain season, right as we're leaning in towards Yule, when we're moving through Sagittarius times, we have Krampusnacht. And Krampus is an incredible representation of an entity that's here as a bit of chaos and pranking and, sinister sort of severity. That's like, let's go, let's break it down. We're doing this. I'm a Sagittarius, so maybe I'm a little biased, but Sagittarius really gets wrapped up in that Christmas BS. No, bitch. We're the crucible. Scorpio is the satin lining of the coffin and the velvet cloak that we wear to the funeral. Sagittarius is the rotting corpse in the ground and worms squirming in your eyeballs. That's what's up. That's why we're crazy. That's why we're crazy. But there's no time for that. Actually, we'll get into it a little bit later in the class. There's going to be time for it. But in all of these celebrations, there is this paradoxical celebration of the breakdown of things and the uplifting of things. And it's true when we think of our modern Halloween celebrations and our modern Samhain celebrations. We might have a very somber moment at one point in our Samhain celebrations where we're thinking on our blessed dead, and we're thinking of, what is happening in our world right now and the frightening elements of our unknown future and all of that stuff. And then in another moment, we're carousing and we're wearing a crazy costume and we're partying with friends and we're being loud and we're having a great time. This is one of those holidays that supports all of that stuff all at the same time. And that celebration of life thing can feel a little, I hesitate to use the word desperate, but I can't think of a better word. Think across the wheel to the opposing Sabbat. That's Beltane or Beltane. The celebration of life at Beltane is very flirty. It's very raunchy, right? It's very like life affirming and sexy and yummy. And at that point, we're coming out of winter, we're halfway through spring, and we're witnessing the abundance of the earth and the life of the earth come back. And we know that in front of us, we have all of this abundance waiting for us. We have all of the growth of summer and all of the stuff that's going to come to fruition in fall. But here on the opposite side, we're looking into the dark. We're staring down into the grave. We're looking at the beginning steps of the Underworld Journey, which we don't know how deep it will go. We don't know how long it will take. We don't know what's going to happen there. And so the insistence on life during Beltane is very easy. It's sort of like good luck not insisting on life and reveling in the body and the tastes and the smells of the physical world. But here at Samhain, it's almost like you better live it up while you can, is a little bit of that energy. But there's also a sense of you better live it up for those who cannot anymore. And again, I don't want to get too much into the politics of what's happening in the world in the midst of this class. You can follow me on social media if you want plenty of that. But we have experienced a profound amount of death in just the last few weeks, but also in the last few years with COVID, and just sort of the 20th century and the 21st century has just been kind of a death fest. We've really been going ham as a species. And there are many people who cannot dance to their favorite song anymore. They can't hug their loved ones. They can't taste their favorite food. They cannot go to their favorite spot and watch a sunset pass down behind their favorite mountain. But we can, because we're still here. And so, in that sense, we have a profound responsibility to live it the fuck up as hard as we can at this time of year for those who cannot. And let them sit in us and experience it one more time through us. Just that. Okay. So how are we working through this on a more granular level? Let's take a moment. That was a lot of information. I know I've pummeled you all. If you're new here, hi. How are we going to work with this on the granular level? Well, excuse me. A lot of this stuff we are going to talk about over the next 6 to 8 weeks in the podcast. So join me weekly, Spinning the Wheel podcast, on all major podcast platforms. And we're going to break this stuff down granularly throughout the coming weeks. But we're going to work with this in a variety of ways. One of the ways we see right at the top of our sky guide for Samhain 2023, the Taurid meteor showers and the Orionid meteor showers. One of the things that we find almost universal, it's not quite, but wherever we have a big old cluster of festivals, holidays, celebrations, observances dedicated to working with the dead and ancestors, we have lots of meteor showers happening at the same time. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, as we like to say on the podcast. No, I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's totally us as beings being like, are those the ancestors? Are those the blessed dead coming back down, raining fiery love, fiery love? Right? Think about wishing upon a star. That whole connection, yeah, takes on a different depth there, doesn't it? So we're going to have a lot of meteor showers as we work through this time of year. For those of us who practice tropical astrology, we are moving through the signs of Scorpio and Sagittarius. For folks that practice sidereal astrology, we are moving through the signs of Libra and Scorpio with a little bit of Sagittarius at the very end, mostly a Yule sign. And our lunar process is going to take us through the new moon in Scorpio, full moon in Taurus, the new moon in Sagittarius, and the full moon in Gemini. So you can kind of plot out and look at your natal chart. We'll get more into that information here in just a second. But know that the sun, if you are, again, practicing tropical astrology, and if you're here in the West, you probably are, that the sun, look at your natal chart, look at the houses that are connected to Scorpio and Sagittarius. Those are the parts of your life that are going to be a little bit more affected by this. And the sun will be passing through these signs. Our new moons are going to be in these signs, and that's where we're going to be kicking off work that we need to do. And then our full moons are going to be in Taurus and in Gemini. And that's where we're going to be maybe seeing some culmination elements or some work that we have built up to a crescendo and now can be put to rest or put aside. Again, we'll talk more intensely about that. What other stuff do we have happening here? Oh, right. From the middle of November or all through November, we have the Leonid meteor showers. I'm like, are there any others? No. We will have the heliacal risings of the fixed stars Alphecca and Antares. These are, I think, both found in Scorpio. Maybe Alphecca is actually in Libra. We will have also our last new moon and last full moons of fall. And that's going to be during Sagittarius when we have our full moon in Gemini. That's our last full moon of the year. And we have our new moon in Sagittarius on December 12th. That's going to be our last new moon of fall. Sorry, not of the year, of fall. And the other super fantastic thing that we've got going on for us in Samhain this year is we also have an eclipse happening on the 28th with the full hunter's moon in Taurus. This will be a partial lunar eclipse. This will close the eclipse window. Our past eclipse was at the end of Mabon. And this will be our last eclipse involving Taurus and Scorpio. We've been dealing with eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio for the last year and a half-ish. It's going to be the end of that. So whatever process or magical work you've been doing with that, that's going to be wrapping up. The nodes have officially moved into Aries and Libra. And so for the most part, our eclipses are going to be in Aries and Libra going forward. It's never exactly perfect, which is why we're having our last eclipse here in Taurus after we just had an eclipse in Libra. No time to explain the astronomy. Just, it's correct. Trust. You can look it up. It's not that difficult to understand. And here also with these moons, we see a couple of interesting traditions. A lot of moons are, the moon names that we use in theory are from Algonquin tribes. But cultures around the planet have names for the full moons, and there's a ton of them in the workbook. There's a whole big giant list of them. But our full moon on October 28th will be our hunter's moon, and this is always the full moon that comes after fall equinox. So whenever that shows up, and then the full moon that is closest to fall equinox is the harvest moon, and then whenever that one happens, the next one is the hunter's moon. So the last one was right next to fall equinox, and this is the next one. And then our last full moon of fall falls in November, and so traditionally this would be called the morning moon. Otherwise, this would be the beaver moon, or any other number of frost moon, fog moon, white moon, trading moon, but morning moon, when that last full moon falls in fall, in November specifically. So that's kind of a general layout of our astronomical moments. Oh, one other thing I'll mention while we're still on this page is solar Samhain. You can see it right there in the middle of the list. November 13th. Oh, no, excuse me, November 7th. Solar Samhain. What is that? That is the point where Earth, in its orbit around the sun, is literally at the halfway point between fall equinox and winter solstice. What's interesting is that this date falls somewhere November 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th. It can kind of fluctuate because, we're not in a perfect circle around our sun. There's a little fluctuation there. And we're talking about movement around the sun versus numbers on a calendar. But this would have also been Old Samhain, this date for a lot of different places. And this puts us at exactly 15 degrees of Scorpio, or exactly halfway through that sign by Western or tropical astrology. And so something that I talk about a lot in these classes is celebrating on the day of is important, but sometimes we're not actually accurate on when we think the day of is. October 31st being very locked in as Samhain has historical precedent, and also it's kind of a modern insistence. We see that Celtics and Celt folk and lots of other people weren't celebrating it for another week to 10 days. It would have been a whole half a lunar cycle later when we actually reached this degree that marked the literal middle between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. And so you have time to work on this stuff. You have time to decide when you want to celebrate these things, and know that you can spread out your celebrations as we work through the era, right? We've got 6 to 8 weeks. We don't have to do it all in one night. Nor will we probably want to do it all in one night. It's nice to be able to spread it out and attend to the ritual on a more granular level, I think, anyways. Okay. So these are the constellations that we are working through, in a sense. When we talk about this is where the sun is traveling. Put that up for you for a moment. This is where the sun is traveling, and so we can't necessarily see that this is happening. And side note to the side note of the side note, these are the tropical signs, as we just discussed in sidereal astrology, which reflects astronomy. The sun is actually moving through Libra and Scorpio and a little bit of Sagittarius. If you want the slide for that, go check out the Mabin class. It's up on this channel. Don't do it right now. Don't leave. Stay here. But in tropical astrology, this is where the sun, in theory, is passing through. And so these are some of the fixed stars that we are going to be hanging out with during this time of year, and their myths are cool and interesting. Antares is literally anti-Aries. If we think about the time of year that Aries is connected to, spring, Aries or anti-Aries is literally saying, we're done with that life stuff, we're ushering in the season of death. Note also that big smear in the middle of this slide, that is the galactic center. And this is currently between Sagittarius and Scorpio. This is what Sagittarius points at with its arrow that it's shooting. It's shooting into the galactic center. And, you know, there's a lot of mythos around stars being our ancestors. There's lots and lots and lots of civilizations that have thought about stars being our ancestors. I wonder if it has anything to do with this. Maybe it has something to do with this giant, beautiful, colorful, foggy smear of stardust and glitter that, you know, goes across the length of our sky. Maybe it's that. Could be. We have stars here that are connected to various deities. Alnasil, or excuse me, Cars Borealis is connected to Inanna or Ishtar. Nunki, of course, is connected to Nunki or Enki, etc. And again, we will talk in further length on the podcast over the next several weeks about these guys, but just to give you a sense of like, this is what the sun is passing through right now. And our ancient ancestors knew this stuff. They were smart. They knew what was going on. You know, they were paying attention to that stuff. And so that this is what's happening for them there. Okay. So let's get a little mystical, because we haven't already. From a purely astrological point of view, and this is in the book, as the last rays of sunlight dwindle, Scorpio oversees a season of transformation. We are faced with the stark issues of sex and death, and reconciling what we are learning from our shadow, and that's individually and collectively. Dive deep. That is my number one piece of advice for you. Take advantage of this. I think of the spiritual and psychological trip that we go on during this time of year as very similar to like the pain that you might feel during a tattoo. And I know some of you have heard me say this before, but right, it's pain. But you can only experience it in that very specific environment, and you can't get it otherwise. Or it's very difficult to replicate, right? There's everything that happens in that place. And it's difficult, but there's something very special about it because it's unique. I think of a lot of the work that we do during this time period to be described in a very similar way of like, this is hard, but it's also like the time for me to be doing this. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to have the most help from the environment around me at this time of year. So let me engage this thing, even though it hurts. Let me engage this thing in the place where it's meant to go. So as we move through Scorpio, we will have our full moon eclipse in Taurus and our new moon in Scorpio. During the full moon in Taurus, I highly encourage eat, drink, and be merry. That is going to be this weekend while we are partying. I know eclipses have some funky energy to them, so your mileage may vary. You might take a bath with some Epsom salts. You might put a piece of clear quartz under your bed. You might light a candle for the dead. You might put out a glass of cool, fresh water for the dead. You know, just to kind of like appease the forces that be. But at the same time, this is absolutely a weekend to insist your vitality and to live as hard as you can for those who cannot. You do what your instinct and what your intuition tells you to do, but those are just some suggestions from me, your local witch. But this harvest has been intense. We've pulled in much karma on this moon. Eat good food, wear fantastic clothes, enjoy your house, enjoy your body, enjoy the blood that pumps in your veins and your heartbeat at your wrist and at the little moment in your neck, you know, that thing. And then on the new moon in Scorpio, which will be deep into November, if you have not already, now is the time to engage your shadow work. What is your rage? What is your fear? What is your helplessness? Again, it gets spooky at this time of year. It gets intense at this time of year, and we are held at this time of year to do this work. And we have so many things happening in the world that are outside of our control that are evoking and invoking this work as well. Okay. Samhain is the witch's new year, and there is an opportunity to hit the reset button on personal and spiritual matters. Forgive. Release debts, financial, energetic, and otherwise, between you and other people. Samhain season shuts the door on the bright part of the year. Our fields are barren, our fruits have been picked, branches lay bare, scratching at the stormy skies. We might have been able to logically rationalize the shift during Mabon, but now we feel the earth dying and changing into the crone. Along with this dissolution, our sense of reality shimmers like a chimera, and we're watching the world from underwater. We wander amongst the veggies in the garden, dying on the vine, the last of our fruit left to rot on the branch, twisting, forlorn, and warped in the frosty night wind. Mold creeps across the flowers we exchanged only months ago. We walk in a liminal space, cloaked in shadows. Both reveling in the destruction and living your best life in the face of it are appropriate responses to the energy of Samhain season. We can see through the veils of time and space, so work with this and reach out lovingly to the dead ones and the ephemeral spirits who are otherwise unavailable. The last half of Samhain season is overseen by Sagittarius. We become accustomed to walking among the spirits, remembering that death makes all of us family, but losing our grip on the physical reality a little bit. And maybe that's okay. Ritual, ceremony, and faith can help us wander in this holy space for the short time that we are here. Listen for and document the messages from the other side and renew your spirit. And again, check out your natal chart to see where it is that Scorpio lies and where it is that Sagittarius lies. This is where we are going to have a lot of action in our life that shows up concerning this portion of the wheel for us. And so as we're moving through Sagittarius, we will have our full moon in Gemini. And I recommend doing a journal entry for this, describing the generations of your family that you know about using only adjectives. Those adjectives we're going to use in another ritual later on in the wheel. And then we have our new moon in Sagittarius, December 12th. Describe an epic journey that calls to you, that would push you out of your comfort zone. It can be any landscape, internal or external. So maybe that epic journey might be some sort of personal progress that you want to challenge yourself towards. Maybe it's literally traveling to the other side of the planet. Maybe it's becoming much more intimately educated and aware of something that feels very remote from you. And this is a way to travel to that place and bring it closer. Sagittarius wants to keep the whole world in its hands. So, okay. So there is our astrology that we are working with for this portion of the wheel. We're staying hydrated. And now we're going to step into tarot for this portion of the wheel. To me, tarot cards are like flashcards. And for me, there is a great synthesis with all of these things that we have been talking about in our cards that we might work with. So let's bring in first our first two tarot helpers. the Death card and the Judgment card. The Death card is connected to the sign of Scorpio in some magical systems, and in some magical systems, Pluto is connected to the planet, or excuse me, Pluto is connected to the card Judgment, Pluto being the modern astrological ruler of Scorpio. In other magical systems, the Judgment card connects to the spirit of fire. This is the spirit Raphael, or the Archangel Raphael that's depicted on this card, blowing the trumpet that is blasting out the heated air, fire air, over the waters of Bethesda, which was a healing pool, a resurrection type of pool in biblical myth. We're stealing things back from the Bible. And new life was brought forth earth from that. So death into a pretty tremendously intense process, and then rebirth, right? They don't always say it that way, right? They're like, oh, it's life, death, rebirth. I'm like, there's something between the death rebirth thing, isn't there? Are you guys leaving something out? Can we get there's an addendum, right? There's an asterisk. Anyways, in the Pamela Coleman Smith deck, we're working with these two cards for Samhain, for the Scorpio portion. And then for the Sagittarius portion, we are working with the Temperance card and the Wheel of Fortune. Temperance connects us to the sign of Sagittarius. The Wheel of Fortune connects us to the planet Jupiter, which is the ruling planet of Sagittarius. Oh, no, go back. Let me go to here. And let me go to here. Okay. So, let me break it down for you all. These cards are from another deck that I am a huge fan of. If you've worked with me, you know I go on and on about this deck. This is the Builders of the Adytum deck. You buy the deck, and it is in black and white, and you paint the cards yourself to develop an intimate relationship with the symbolism on the cards. And here we see Death, the Tower, and Judgment. So Death, Scorpio, Judgment, Pluto, the Tower, Mars. And Mars is the ancient planetary ruler of Scorpio. So if you would like to work with both, either or, your mileage may vary, do what suits you. But these are the cards that we're working with as we move through Scorpio season. And so here's Death with its great sickle, literally cutting down everything and everyone. Nothing can resist the tide of change and transformation. This is just a part of life. We see the sun very, very low on the horizon. Some folks say that this is a sunrise. Some folks insist that this is a sunset. Either way, this is the lowest point on the horizon that we can interact with the sun. So the gist of the symbolism here is the sun is at its lowest point. It's at its weakest here. You know, even death is higher than the sun. And, you know, on one side we have the Tower, on the other side we have Judgment. Elements that certainly can play into a lot of our myths and symbols around death and around Samhain. The Tower, of course, depicts, a time period of frightening transformation, shocking changes that seem to come out of nowhere. And we don't understand why the things are happening to us. We're deeply emotionally affected. We are trying to rely on our lived experience, but our lived experience cannot prepare us for this incredible event that cuts down kings, that cuts down children, that cuts down priests, and everything and everyone seems to fall before this being, this entity. And then on the other side, we have the Judgment card, and we have this entity that is suggesting some kind of rebirth, some kind of continuance after the experience that we're having with death. In this card, the arm positions of those three people at the bottom, those three gray people, are meant to kind of look like Lux or LVX, which is in Latin lux or light. So there is an insistence in this Judgment card that there is a light after the darkness. There is a waking up of some kind after the moment of death. But those people are gray because partly they're made up of their lived experiences, and partly because when we are experiencing the judgment card, our past selves can be so removed from us that we almost don't even recognize ourselves. That's how profound the shift and the change is that we experience in this card. And then moving into Sagittarius, we have Temperance and the Wheel of Fortune. Again, this is the Builders of the Adetum versions of these cards. In Temperance, we see another angelic or winged type being, a rainbow over their head, 1 foot on land, 1 foot in the water. They have an eagle on one side and a lion on the other. The eagle and the lion connect us to a variety of things, but they also connect us to the astro signs of Scorpio and Leo. Scorpio, eagle. Scorpio has at times been depicted as an eagle. Could be Aquarius too. Throwing that out there, but probably not. And we see the lion and the eagle on the Wheel of Fortune as well. We also see a person and a bull, and these are the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac: Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And so by the time we move into this portion of our Samhain work, when we're working with these cards, Temperance is sort of saying, like, okay, we've been considering this and we've been going through this massive transformation. What are we going to do with all of this? All the parts have been sorted out, and we see the black and the white. We see the plus and the minus. We see the death and the life. What happens when we bring them all together within ourselves? And we combine that utilizing both our intuition and our lived experience. What does that look like for us? And of course, it's us going through a refining period, and our true self is sort of revealed in this, in the relationship between the Death card and the Temperance card. It really is, we're killing off all the parts of ourself that are not serving our highest goals. That's really the metaphor here. We're letting go of the things that we've been holding on to that are holding us back: our fears, our doubts, our insecurity, our shame, our embarrassment, our ignorance. And we are sort of offering those things up. And we're saying there's nothing, my ego doesn't get to hold on to anything. Everything can be up on the chopping block for me to reveal what I actually am in this world. That's us in the Temperance card. And the Wheel of Fortune is a reminder of, even when we are consciously and willingly stepping into this process, it can still feel wild, intense, out of control, difficult to keep, it's kind of a I can't touch the bottom of the pool kind of a feeling, right? Like, there are forces larger than me and I don't exactly understand what's happening. And this feels outside of my control entirely. And these cards are sort of saying, yeah, sometimes as we move through life, we do find ourselves in situations where most of the stuff is completely outside of our control, and we have to just move through this. We have to just find a way to make our way through this. And they are refining moments where the true self is revealed. Now, we could do it in nice ways. We don't have to do it in really horrible and scary ways, but as humans, we tend to be disinclined to do things nicely. We usually have to have it be really awful before we're like willing to make any kind of change at all. And so the Temperance card is like, okay, you wanted to go through the crucible, man. You could have just like read the pamphlet and done the thing and like just be more of yourself. But no, you want me to burn off a bunch of stuff and take you through a really harrowing experience and have this whole underworld thing. Oh, it's fine. Okay, fine. Buy your ticket. Take your ride. Do your thing, man. Whatever you say. So these cards are overseeing this process as we move through this. And so these are some of our helpers, and now here's more of our helpers. Actually, let me get this big so you can see this. Again, while we are moving through Scorpio season, we're hanging out with the Death card and the Judgment card, and perhaps the Tower as well. You do you. And these cards, the major arcana, are depictions of these big philosophical, existential elements that we're wrangling with. The minor arcana are here to help us deal with the practical, real world iterations of those philosophical ideas, right? The major arcana are depicting these big states of existence and these big concepts and thoughts. The minor arcana are like, cool, but what's that actually going to look like in my lived life? Well, let's start with the Five of Cups, everybody's favorite, right? Who doesn't love hanging out with the Five of Cups? Sorrow, feeling your feelings, taking some time to be alone, witnessing the loss, seeing the loss that was outside of your control, the negative things, the horrible things that are happening in your personal life or in the world at large that are frightening, destabilizing, disappointing, and outside of your control. Taking time to be alone, to feel that and really have those conversations with yourself. Big deal. Six of Cups, figuring out how to be open-hearted in this world of all worlds, but not be taken advantage of. How do I be open-hearted but not naive? How do I be open-hearted but not a victim, and not taken advantage of? What is that tightrope? That feels hard to do. And then the Seven of Cups is, how do I wish for a better world without completely losing myself to the irrationality of just daydreaming about a better world? In the Seven of Cups, we can really have a deep experience around sort of wanting to just lose ourselves in the fantasy of the terrors or the fantasy of the utopia that we wish existed, rather than staying in the world where we very much don't have those things and we have to pay taxes and fold laundry and deal with each other and, call our representatives again and call our, that thing, right? How do I stay grounded in this world when my fantasy life, whether that's nightmares or fantasies, my dream life, my internal world is beckoning me so intensely because this world is just too damn hard and I don't wanna. Okay. And then when we are moving through Sagittarius, we have, again, our major arcana, Temperance, Wheel of Fortune, representing our big concepts, our big archetypes that we're hanging out with. But in the practical world, what might this look like? Well, in the Eight of Wands, it can feel like, oh, wow, there's a lot of energy. Look at how we are coming down from the abundance. There's so much stuff. There's so much to deal with. The world is thick. The world is worlding. And it's like up in my face while it's doing it. And that's great sometimes, and it's overwhelming sometimes, and it's cool sometimes, and I'm riding the high sometimes, and I'm running to catch up sometimes, and woo, Eight of Wands. Nine of Wands, man, I'm getting exhausted. Like, I've been working my ass off trying to keep up with everything that's happening in this world. I don't know if I can keep up with all of this. I don't know how I feel about all of this stuff that's going on. And then Saturn and Sagittarius, I'm truly becoming overwhelmed and burdened by all of the stuff that's going on and all of the things that are happening in me, all of the various versions of me that are trying to respond to all of the things that are happening in the world, good, bad, and otherwise. And so by the time we get to the end of Sagittarius, that is the end of December. That's when Sagittarius ends and Capricorn starts, that's winter solstice. And so think of this card as those last couple of weeks right before winter solstice, or that last week or so right before winter solstice, right? Even if we're not practicing Christmas, we still may be feeling very overwhelmed by just everything that's happening, all the people around us who are doing that, the work parties and the blah, blah, blah. But again, this year and this time on Earth, there's a lot of things coming at us that could feel exceptionally overwhelming. And so by the time we get to Sagittarius, we're kind of like, man, I got to pull the whole car over. This is just a lot. This is just a lot. Okay. So a small piece of writing, again, this is from the workbook, just about the Scorpio portion of this work. The images we encounter in the Death, Tower, and Judgment cards strike at the core of most people who see them. The concepts are similarly daunting. In the Death card, we are faced with profound transformation, a literal death of the old state of being. In the Tower, we're faced with the psychological effects of your world being flipped upside down as reality proves everything we know is wrong. Remember, our natural world is breaking down. In the Judgment card, the horn of truth blows over the heads of the dead, rising out of their graves. What do we make of all of this? As unlikely as it may seem, these three cards are a reminder of the connectivity between all of us here in the universe. Our fear, our greed, the wounds that we carry, all keep us separated from each other. But death, i.e. change, reminds us we are all golden shafts of wheat growing up out of the same ground. And yes, time is going to take our best from us, and we will be forced to adapt if we want to progress. But we will continue to suffer our losses and suffer being abandoned or betrayed, or suffer from our own delusions, projections, and fantasies of persecution if we only see change and chaos as an attack on us personally. The Tower, also called the House of God in some decks, represents the ego death that we experience when we remember that we are all emanations from the same source, that all beings experience these forces. It's not personal. And that all these things that we have built a sense of self with are actually illusions. We might want to lash out or distrust anyone who seems to relieve us from our own responsibility or dissolve our fears in substance. But the Judgment card reveals that our fears around change are unfounded. Yes, parts of us will die as old pieces evolve or fall away. We need to mourn our wounds and the pain that unexpected chaos inflicts on us. We need to forgive our foolishness and thank the parts of us that have utilized broken coping mechanisms that keep us alive. When we push through fears of losing ourselves, because of course there is no self to lose, we push our imagination and hearts to the limits of the cosmos. We stretch out beyond ourselves and we remember that we are part of something more. And that's just to get you through the Scorpio portion. While working with these cards, I also can recommend this collection, the Tower, the Judgment, and the Fool card. I call this the Posse of the Death card. I have big pieces up on my website for free, writing on the Death card, the Tower card, the Judgment card, the Fool card. I also have classes for patrons on all of these cards, maybe except the Fool. Everybody except the Fool. 2-hour lectures on each of these cards. But why the Fool? Well, in some magical systems, the Fool card is connected to the planet Uranus, which is exalted in the sign of Scorpio. In some magical systems. This is not universal. But think about the Fool being a part of this whole collection here. Now think of all of our revelry and pranking. What? I'm sure it's just a coincidence, but come on, right? Here we have, you know, the very, very first, last card in the tarot deck. This card shows up whenever it feels like because it's all numbers and no numbers, and it's dancing along the edge, right? A direct emanation of source, laughing in the face of chaos, laughing in the face of the unknown and death, foolishness, silliness, pranking, right? Ha ha ha. Am I going to slip? Who knows, right? We even have in some Fool cards, their butt is hanging out. And so, these cards, I think, are really here to assist us. I definitely recommend utilizing these cards for journal entries. They are fantastic archetypes to put on your altars throughout this season as focuses, or in place of other deities or archetypes that you might want to work with. Put them all out, use them throughout the season, you know, whatever makes sense for you. Okay, so we are just about to the end of class, so I want to kind of wrap us up a little bit here with some Scorpio bits, and then a little bit of information on, oh, no, don't look at that. A little bit of information on stuff that we can utilize for celebrating and building altars and things like that. Actually, I'm going to put this back to here. So some notes on the Scorpion, also in the workbook. All the stuff that I'm reading tonight is in the workbook. Scorpio was a giant scorpion sent by the earth goddess Gaia to slay Orion when he threatened to kill all the beasts of Earth. Think about that for just a second, right? Interesting. Interesting, right? Oh, you're getting out of hand, humans. Let me curtail your bullshit really quickly. I don't mean to speak on her behalf, but I'm gonna make that assumption. The Scorpion stung Orion on the heel, marked by the star Rigel, and killed him. These two opponents are on opposite sides of the sky. The Scorpion rises as Orion starts to sink, and this was seen as Orion running away from the attacker. Together with Orion, these two constellations are gateways to the Milky Way. And so Orion, you know, we saw in our constellation slide, we've got Orion and Scorpio and Sagittarius. Scorpio being here-ish, and Orion would be over here, over here, on this side of the sky. The Akkadian called it the place where one bows down. Others saw it as the symbol of darkness, showing the decline of the sun's power after the autumnal equinox, then located in it. It's also been depicted in conjunction with the constellation Libra as a lamp held in the Scorpion's claws. The sun actually only spends 9 days technically in the constellation of Scorpio and passes directly through the claws of Scorpio. Alchemists believed it was only while the sun was in Scorpio that it was possible to turn iron into gold. Iron, of course, connected to Mars, the ancient ruling planet of Scorpio. Iron also connected to a lot of our superstitions and folklore around the Fae or the She, as well as witches, etc., etc. This, of course, ancient planetary ruler. Scorpio contains the red giant Antares against Aries or Mars, one of the 4 Babylonian guardian stars of the heavens, lying nearly on the ecliptic. Mythologically, a sacred heel is that part of the sun or the moon that at setting touches the earth or the sea on the horizon, much like what we see depicted in the death card. The bruise it receives is poisonous in that it causes the whole body to collapse or sink. The Samhain believe that at death, the soul leaves through the heel of the body. And that's all I'm going to read from the workbook. There's more here. There's a lot more here. I think that we have a good rounded idea of our archetypes and our energies that we're working with this time of year and the kind of stuff that we can do. So let's now look at what can we do for our rituals? So, first off, walking a labyrinth or maze, communing with the dead, holding dumb suppers or silent suppers, sacrifice, and sacrifice as it means something to you. I am not advocating for any specific practice under the word sacrifice, but you know what that word means to you, and this is a good time of year to do that stuff. Divination and prophecy out the wazoo. Feasts, bonfires, playing pranks, sex and sensuality, and again, whatever those words mean for you, wherever you are in life. Magical workings of all kinds make sense at this time of year, are especially potent at this time of year. Casting protections, doing inner work, manifesting stuff. And the thing that I'm going to tell you to do at every Sabbat, which is go out into nature. Whether that is taking an extra long walk through your neighborhood, going to your local park, if you get outside of your town or your city and actually go hang out in whatever the nature is around you, the desert, the forest, the ocean, what have you, the mountains, the valleys, go there and witness the shift. Witness the shift that nature is going through. Smell the air, see the leaves, see the plants and what they're doing. Of course, with climate change, this conversation is shifting rapidly for us. And that's another reason for us to be very perceptive and be paying close attention as pagans and witches. Because what are the changes that are happening? That too. But here you can see we have two big piles of types of events. And like I mentioned before, don't think you have to do all of this in one night, right? There might be a night that feels especially potent for one kind of work over another. Listen to your gut. Go with your instinct on that. Also, if you are a normal person, you probably have kids or pets or a partner or neighbors. You have a job that you have to deal with. You may have, family members that you have to wrangle and stuff like that. And so it might be that, this year, 2023, what year is it? I have no idea. This year, October 2023, October 31st is a Tuesday night. That's not super convenient for a lot of people. So I bet a lot of people are going to do their Halloween and Samhain celebrations, revelry, get-togethers on this weekend leading up to it, right? Or maybe they'll wait until the next weekend and do it then when it's closer to the 7th and our solar Samhain. But all of this is appropriate. The best time to have the celebration is the time that makes sense for you. That's actually the best time, right? Because that means you can get together with your people and celebrate. That's the point, right? Don't get too freaked out about, oh man, it's on the 31st and I had to wait until the 2nd, or I had to do it on the 28th. Whatever, dude. It's fine. It's going to be okay. We have a full moon this weekend and eclipse. So, as we talked about before, good luck out there. You might carry a little salt with you just in case. If anybody starts to get wild, just huck some salt at them. It's a great, super old protection ritual and spell. Just get the fuck away from me. As the gods decreed. But, maybe part of Samhain is about really living your life and feeling the blood in your veins and celebrating and getting a little wild. That's going to be appropriate for one night, right? Or for one portion of this Sabbat. And then some other parts of this Sabbat might be very sorrow-filled or very somber and very meditative and very quiet and very still, very private. And that's also totally appropriate. So engage in all of these spaces at the times that make sense for you in the order that makes sense for you. If you are a person who likes to build altars, hi, that's me. If you're a person who loves to build altars, here's a bunch of stuff. So gateways, a spiral, skulls and bones, spiderwebs, labyrinths, masks, and a broom. These are all very traditional symbols and ideas, magical concepts to have on your altar or anywhere around your home. Of course, you can also wear a t-shirt with this stuff on it or jewelry with this stuff on it or whatever. That's also totally appropriate. We'll come back to our meditations in just a second. Animal helpers, wolves, pigs, dogs, etc. These are all creatures that feature prominently in various myths and folklore dedicated to the wild hunt and all of our very many goddesses and gods that are going through their transition period at this time. And all black creatures, especially, very, very potent. Again, perfectly appropriate to put any of these on the altar, again, following the traditions that you work with, etc. But more so reading the myth and then bringing in the animal helper. Food and drink, pomegranates, of course. Freshly roasted nuts, apples, pumpkins, cakes with lucky tokens in them. That's a tradition that's used in lots of places as a part of divination. And again, we see that all through fall, winter, and into early spring. Mead and mulled cider, mulled wines. I'll say this every Sabbath, anything and everything that is in season locally where you live is very appropriate to eat and drink at this time of year. Mulled wines and ciders and meads and things like that that you've been brewing in the high part of the year, now that we are stepped into the dark part of the year, opening up some of those bottles if they've had enough time to do their thing, very appropriate. Absinthe and fennel, especially during any of our death practices or working with spirits. Fennel and absinthe are very helpful there. Candy and sweets for the kid in all of us, for any child spirits that might be around that we are, giving offerings to, and invoking childhood for ourselves as well. Incense and oils, musk, opium, oud, jasmine, coconut, patchouli, all champa, any of the champas. All of these are very, very appropriate to burn throughout Samhain season for a variety of magics, but all of these pretty much support most of the magics that you're going to be emphasizing during this time period. Mineral helpers, again, these can be things that you put on your altar or that you wear as jewelry. And same with the incense and oils, you can burn this or you can wear it, make a spray for yourself, and work with it wherever you're hanging out. Black tourmaline, in particular, onyx, obsidian, these are going to be smoky quartz. These are going to be much more protective and grounding. Labradorite, opal, especially fire opals, these are going to be more assisting in any divinatory practices and ritual or magic that you're doing. Flint as well, I should say. And topaz, carnelian, and bloodstone are very helpful in that, like, life is for the living, let me be very assured in my vitality kind of magic that you might be doing. Plant helpers, marigolds, all over the board with Dia de los Muertos, calendula, mugwort, wormwood, deepney of Crete, which is a type of oregano, mandrake, etc. Obviously, some of these are toxic, some of these might be poisonous. Don't sue me. Be careful with what you're doing. Read up on it before you go out into the wilderness and just huck some stuff. If you're harvesting things, please do it ethically. Leave no trace, leave things better than you found it, all of that stuff. For every 10 plants you find, take 1 or 2, leave the rest, all of that stuff. But all of these are assistants for us, again, things that we might put on our altars, that we might wear, etc. Again, be careful with the poisonous and the toxic shit. But working with poisonous and toxic substances is also traditional at this time of year. Don't sue me. Don't fucking kill yourself, please. All right. And for your Samhain rituals, along with all the other stuff that I have recommended or suggested, you might also write down these meditations as just things to ponder or journal entries to kick off some ritual writing for yourself. Consider the elders in your life. What are the roles? What roles do elders play in your community? What challenges have they faced? And then consider your ancestors and the challenges they faced. What guidance have they provided for you? And our ancestors can provide us guidance in a wide variety of ways, so you are welcome to interpret that sentence however you see fit. But in what ways are you becoming a good ancestor? Side note, that's an excellent podcast. What ways are you becoming a good ancestor? Someday, right? Someday it's going to be us that people are invoking with their bobbed apples and their roasted chestnuts and their silent suppers. What are we doing now to set that then? There. And last but not least, a prayer for you all. This is from me. I wrote this. O black-winged lover, O void of peace after weeping, O silence, O rot. The one who knew me as seed and knows what I will be after the fruit of me has withered. Open your western gate. Dress the threshold with yew and cypress and carry me home. But not yet. Well, my friends, that is Samhain 2023. Thank you so much for joining me. As we started the class with a prayer for peace, we end the class with a prayer for peace. I highly encourage you to call your representatives and demand a ceasefire. I highly encourage you to call your representatives and demand protections and sanctions for Gaza, for Palestine, and an end to this latest form of aggression that they are experiencing. Wishing peace and protection and power to all oppressed people around the world. Life is for the living, and as much as they may try to crush out the spirit of the human flame, they cannot. What we are witnessing now is the death of dinosaurs, the ending of an old paradigm. And it goes out crashing and banging and trying to take everything with it. But we know how the story goes, right? We just talked about it. It gets a little harrowing, but it's pretty incredible on the other side. And I don't mean the other side like heaven. I mean like the other side, like, you know, in a couple of generations from now. We may not be there to see it. We won't probably be there to see it. But we can do our part to help create that future. That's us being good ancestors now. That's us being good ancestors now. Happy Samhain. Happy Halloween. Happy Third Harvest. Happy Witches' New Year. Blessed be. And I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes. If anybody has any comments or questions, I'm here. There is a bit of a lag, but I'm going to wait. Patty, thank you so much. Saji Mama, thank you. Darlene, I didn't see you before. Hi. Fagan, I don't think I saw you. Dresk, I don't think I saw you either. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you were here for this. Thank you for joining me. Again, if you have nothing else to say, throw a pumpkin or a witch in the chat. But again, thanks so much for joining me. I'm going to hang out for just a couple more seconds, minutes, whatever, a minute or so, because like I said, there's a little bit of a lag with the live stream. If anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to throw them in the chat here, or please feel free to send me an email. Let's talk about some stuff. Get a hold of me through my website and get a hold of me through Patreon. Thanks for being here, Darlene. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you so much. Okay. Is that everybody? Is that it? All right, I'm going to wait a little bit more, because I know sometimes people are going to take a second to type stuff out. Thank you, Fagan. I know. It's a lot. It's heavy stuff right now, and that's, sometimes why this kind of work almost feels like, are we really trying to engage this? And it's like, hell yeah, we are. We absolutely We absolutely are trying to engage this. We have to. We have to. We have to. Awesome. Yes, Sarah Marie. Perfect. Yep. Please do. Yeah. For a longer question like that, absolutely. And, feel free to send me a question. And also, if you want to schedule a reading with me, I do astrology readings and tarot readings as well. So if it's something that's like a longer question, it might be good to set an appointment. How can I tell what lines up with Sagittarius and the other one? You mean Scorpio? What do you mean, how can I tell what lines up with it? Do you mean like the housing system? Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh, the housing system. Okay. So, in theory, on most natal chart drawings, um, there are going to be lines that divide the signs, and then often there are also lines that are dividing the houses. And usually, not all charts will do this, but most charts will have a little circle in the middle that has a series of numbers. And so those numbers will tell you what house. And then you can just look at the houses that overlay the signs. Depending on the natal chart system that you're working with, it's likely that your houses and signs don't line up exactly. That's really normal for Western astrology, for tropical astrology. It's very normal that our houses and signs do not line up exactly. Then you also can do whole house signs. That is another charting system that's very popular right now, and it makes the houses and the signs line up perfectly with each other. Some people like that, some people don't. And so wherever you see the house start, it should have a sign next to it, like a sign symbol next to it. I wish I had the capacity to open up another screen right now. It'd just be too much. But I can only ask so much of my little laptop. But, you may have Aries begin here, and then so many degrees down into Aries, you have another line, and then the number there says 2. That means the second house starts in Aries. And so the second house is Aries, or Aries is the concerned sign of the second house. And then what comes after Aries? Taurus. And then the third house is going to be somewhere in there, most likely. But yes, to be very, very accurate about it, we would want to look at your chart and do it. But this is a relatively easy question, and if you send me an email, I can just send you a picture and show you what I'm talking about. You don't have to set up an appointment for that. Okay. All right, my friends. Happy Samhain. Take care of yourselves. Check in with your loved ones. And be safe out there. Blessed be.